Bone and clothing fragments found in a renewed search for Madeleine McCann.
May 3rd, 2007, Praia da Luz, Portugal. A resort town bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, promising serenity and peace, prepared for the night. The air was saturated with the scent of the salty sea and blooming plants. But this night brought not rest, but a chilling terror, whose echo would reverberate across the globe for decades. In apartment 5A of the Ocean Club Resort Complex, a 3-year-old girl named Madeleine McCann vanished from her bed. There were no screams to pierce the night's silence, no signs of a desperate struggle. Her younger twin siblings, 2-year-old Sean and Amelie, continued to sleep peacefully in their cribs, just a few feet from the empty space where their sister had just been. The front door was locked from the inside, just as her parents had left it. But the window in their bedroom, which faced a quiet street, was wide open, and the exterior metal shutters, which should have been securely lowered and locked, had been raised. This could only have been done by someone outside, someone with strength and intent. Just 55 meters away on the terrace of a tapas restaurant, her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, were dining with friends. They had created a system that seemed reliable and reasonable to them, taking turns checking on the children every half hour. They were confident they were close enough to hear any sound, any disturbance. But on this fateful night, their confidence was shattered. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. Not the neighbors, not other guests, not the staff. The timeline of events was full of gaping holes that were impossible to fill. Was it a kidnapping, planned to the smallest detail by a cold-blooded predator? A tragic accident that someone was desperately trying to conceal, setting off a chain reaction of lies? Or something even more sinister, hiding under the cover of darkness and family secrecy? The story of Madeleine McCann is not just a missing child case. It is a labyrinth of contradictions, a devastating failure of law enforcement, the mercilessness of the media, and the unbreakable love of parents who refuse to give up in the face of the unthinkable. Years later, there are only more questions, and the main one, haunting the world, remains unanswered. Where is Madeleine McCann? Before their surname became synonymous with tragedy, Kate and Jerry McCann were the embodiment of the British dream. Educated, successful, hardworking. Jerry, a respected consultant cardiologist, and Kate, a general practitioner who had temporarily left her career for her family. Their life in the quiet, almost idyllic village of Rothley in Leicestershire was stable, comfortable, and full of hope. From the outside, it seemed they had everything one could dream of. A beautiful home, prestigious professions, a strong marriage. But behind this facade of well-being was a long and painful road to parenthood. Years of struggling with infertility had been a painful chapter in their marriage, filled with quiet tears, unfulfilled hopes, and endless medical procedures that were both physically and mentally draining. After 5 years of desperate attempts, they turned to a last resort, in vitro fertilization, IVF. And finally, in May of 2003, their prayers were answered. Madeleine Beth McCann was born. To them, she was a true miracle, long-awaited and hard-won. Bright, curious, full of inexhaustible energy and a love for life. She was so special, Jerry recalled fondly in an early interview. She looked like Kate, but she inherited the McCann character. Loud, a true extrovert. For her age, she was so articulate and was a real ringleader among the younger children. On holiday, she was the eldest of 8 children, and she loved every minute of it. That's the image I hold in my head. They affectionately called her Maddie. A few years later, another miracle occurred, this time completely unexpected. Kate became pregnant naturally and gave birth to twins, Sean and Amelie. The McCann family felt complete and utterly happy. Madeleine, as the older sister, adored her younger brother and sister, showing surprising care and tenderness. She was the center of their small universe. In the spring of 2007, they planned a week-long vacation in sunny Portugal. They chose the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz in the Algarve region. The dates were simple, from Saturday, April 28th to Saturday, May 5th. It was meant to be a relaxing, informal getaway with their closest friends. They weren't traveling alone. With them came 7 of their friends, mostly doctors and medical professionals whom the press would later dub the Tapas 7. Dr. David Payne with his wife Fiona and her mother Diane Webster, Dr. Russell O'Brien with his partner Jane Tanner, and Dr. Matthew Oldfield with his wife Rachel. Together, they brought 5 more children, creating a large and lively group. Their evenings followed an established ritual, a group dinner at the Tapas restaurant on the resort grounds while the children slept in the nearby apartments. It was an idyllic picture, filled with laughter, wine, and a sense of complete security. They were among friends, in a beautiful place, far from their worries. No one could have imagined that this paradise would soon become the site of their personal hell, and their names would become known to the entire world for the most terrible reason possible. Apartment 5A, where the McCanns were staying, was on the ground floor, overlooking a small, quiet street outside the main complex. This was a crucial detail. The apartment was not within a secured perimeter. Any passerby could freely approach the windows or the sliding patio doors that opened onto a small terrace. The Tapas restaurant, where the group dined each evening, was approximately 50 to 55 meters away. The distance seemed negligible, but it was critical. There was no direct line of sight from the restaurant terrace to the apartment. The view was blocked by hedges and other buildings. On the evening of May 3rd, around 8:30 p.m., Kate and Jerry sat down at the table with their friends. Their children, like their friends' children, were asleep in their apartments. They didn't have baby monitors. This decision would later draw a storm of criticism, but at that moment, it seemed reasonable. They were nearby. They checked on the children regularly. It was a system built on trust and the belief that nothing bad could happen. 9:05 p.m. Jerry McCann gets up from the table for the first check. He uses his key to enter the apartment through the front door. In the children's bedroom, he sees Madeleine sleeping peacefully in her bed by the window. The twins, Sean and Amelie, are asleep in their cribs. Everything is fine. He notices the bedroom door was left ajar and leaves it in the same position so that the light from the hallway won't wake the children. He lingers for a moment, making sure the children are sleeping soundly, then quietly locks the front door and returns to the restaurant. On the way, he stops for a brief conversation with another resort guest, Jeremy Wilkins. Around 9:15 p.m., Jane Tanner, one of the friends returning after checking on her own children, notices a dark figure who would become central to one of the theories. A man tall and thin, in a dark jacket and light-colored, possibly beige pants, is walking quickly down the road, carrying a small child in his arms. The child is barefoot, dressed in light-colored, possibly pink pajamas. The child's limbs hang limply, a posture Jane would later describe as unsettling. At that moment, she doesn't think much of it. She assumes it's just another parent carrying their child from the evening kids club. She walks past without calling out to him. This moment would become known as the Tanner sighting and would haunt her for years to come. 9:30 p.m. Matthew Oldfield, another friend from the group, offers to check on the McCann's children along with his own, as their apartments are next to each other. He approaches apartment 5A, pushes open the door to the children's bedroom, but unlike Jerry, he doesn't go inside so as not to wake the children. He stands in the doorway listening. He thinks he hears steady breathing but doesn't see each child individually. The room seems quiet and calm. Convinced that all is well, he returns to the table and reports this to the McCanns. This incomplete check would create another fatal gap in the timeline. 10 p.m. It's Kate's turn. She enters the apartment and immediately feels a chilling sense of dread. Something is wrong. The children's bedroom door is open wider than she had left it. When she tries to close it, a gust of wind from the room slams it shut. At that moment, she notices the most important thing. The bedroom window, which was always kept closed, is wide open, and the curtain is flapping violently in the wind. She rushes to Madeleine's bed. It's empty. The pillow is askew, and Madeleine's favorite toy, a pink plush cat named Cuddle Cat, is lying on the edge. Madeleine would never have left without it. In her own horrified words, "I glanced into the room. It was dark. I was trying to see Madeleine. She should have been there. Suddenly, I realized she wasn't. I thought she might have wandered into our bedroom. Maybe she got scared. When she wasn't there, that's when the real panic started. I rushed back to the children's room, and at that moment a gust of wind blew the curtains open and I saw the shutter was up and the window was pushed open. That's when I knew. I had no doubt. Someone had taken our daughter. She runs out of the apartment, racing barefoot to the restaurant. She bursts in on her friends with a scream that will forever remain in their memory, a scream of primal terror. She's gone. They've taken her. Chaos erupts. Friends, staff, resort guests, dozens of people rush to search. They split up, combing the area around the pool, the beach, the dark alleys behind the complex, shouting her name into the night silence. But Madeleine had vanished, dissolved into the Portuguese night, leaving no trace. In any child abduction case, the first hours are the golden hours. This is the crucial time when the trail is still fresh, and the chances of finding the child alive are highest. In the case of Madeleine McCann, these golden hours were not just missed. They were trampled by a series of stunning failures, bureaucratic confusion, and fatal incompetence. The police were not called immediately. It was only around 10:40 p.m., nearly an hour after Kate raised the alarm, that a resort manager finally called the local GNR, Guardia Nacional Republicana, the National Republican Guard. The officers who arrived were not major case investigators. They were patrolmen whose primary job was traffic control and minor offenses. They were not trained to handle abduction cases and, apparently, did not grasp the full gravity of the situation. By the time they arrived, the crime scene was hopelessly and irreversibly contaminated. Dozens of people, friends, staff, sympathetic guests, had been walking freely through apartment 5A, looking under beds and in closets. Every step they took destroyed potential evidence. Fingerprints, shoe prints, fibers from the abductor's clothing. No one secured the area. There was no crime scene tape, no roadblocks, not even a basic list of names of those who entered and exited. If the kidnapper had been among the guests or staff, he could have quietly walked away before dawn. Key procedural steps were delayed with criminal negligence. The official statements from the grief-stricken Kate and Jerry McCann were not taken until the next morning, 10 to 12 hours after the disappearance. This delay was not just unprofessional, it was ruinous. Memories, distorted by shock and panic, fade over time, and the slightest inconsistencies in their stories, caused by stress, would later be used against them. The forensic examination was conducted with flagrant violations. Crime scene photos were not taken immediately, destroying the possibility of reconstructing the exact scene for future analysis. The collection of evidence, such as DNA and fingerprints, was done carelessly and unsystematically. Some potentially important samples were lost. Others were processed using outdated methods that rendered them useless for modern analysis. Maps and diagrams of the crime scene were lost or replaced with altered versions days later. The testimony of Jane Tanner, who saw a man with a child, was initially all but ignored. The police didn't ask the right questions, didn't take her words seriously. It was only much later, when the chance to identify this man was lost, that her account became known as the Tanner sighting, perhaps the only key to the mystery, lost in the first few hours. In Portugal, there was no emergency alert system like the Amber Alert. Madeleine's photograph was not immediately distributed across the country. Border services and airports were notified with a delay. Precious hours slipped away. It was only the next morning that a more experienced unit, the PJ, Polícia Judiciária, took over the case, but by then, the damage had been done. Perhaps the most shocking failure, symbolizing the entire chaotic mess, was that just a few weeks later, apartment 5A, the place where a child had vanished, was rented out again to tourists. The crime scene was turned back into a vacation rental, erasing the last remaining traces and any hope of a re-examination. The investigation was doomed from the start, buried under a mountain of errors, missed opportunities, and mutual distrust between different police departments. When the Portuguese police, faced with a lack of evidence and mounting international pressure, began to doubt the McCann's innocence, the press, sensing blood in the water, followed their lead. What began as a national tragedy turned into one of the most brutal and merciless media trials in modern history. The McCann family found themselves at the epicenter of a hurricane of rumors, innuendos, and outright lies. At the center of this storm was Kate McCann. Her behavior was analyzed under a microscope by tabloids, TV shows, and self-proclaimed body language experts. She didn't weep on camera. She appeared composed, collected, trying to maintain her dignity in the face of an unimaginable tragedy. To many, she seemed too calm, too cold, for a mother whose child had just been abducted. Headlines screamed about her detachment, hinting at a lack of maternal instinct. Even Madeleine's stuffed toy, Cuddle Cat, which Kate constantly carried as a symbol of hope and connection to her daughter, was labeled a cynical and manipulative prop designed to elicit sympathy. The couple's decision to hire a public relations team, including former government press secretary Clarence Mitchell, backfired. Instead of appearing as desperate parents in need of help, they were perceived as calculating PR managers managing their image. This added fuel to the fire of suspicion. To the public, it looked staged or, worse, planned, critics noted. The culmination was a front-page headline in the British tabloid The Daily Express: "They did it." Without a trial, without charges, just a direct, brazen accusation delivered to a multi-million-strong audience. The McCanns sued for libel and won. The newspaper was forced to issue a public apology and pay £550,000 sterling in damages. But the damage to their reputation was already done. As their lawyer Adam Tudor said, "I would hope that newspapers will reflect very seriously on the way they have covered this story." Media expert Max Clifford called it a shot across the bows of Fleet Street that would make editors more cautious. But it was too late. Kate's personal diaries, seized by the police, mysteriously leaked to the press. Her most private thoughts, her struggle with grief and despair, were turned inside out and twisted into headlines hinting at her guilt and emotional instability. Her deep Catholic faith, her prayers for her daughter's return. All of it was perverted and presented as a cheap spectacle. The internet became a battlefield. Anonymous threats, accusations of negligence for leaving the children alone, wild conspiracy theories, all of it rained down on the family. The line between fair questioning and targeted harassment was erased. The press wasn't just reporting the story, it was judging it. The McCanns found themselves on trial in the court of public opinion, where the verdict was rendered long before all the facts were presented. Behind the scenes of the Portuguese investigation, which had quickly stalled, a dangerous and convenient assumption was brewing. The absence of clear signs of a break-in, the window was open but not broken, the lock undamaged, led some investigators to a thought. If no one came in from the outside, perhaps the tragedy happened inside. This was a theory that relieved them of the need to find an elusive kidnapper and absolved the police of some responsibility for their failure. Instead of expanding the search, the police began to narrow their focus onto the only people who were there that night: the parents. On September 7, 2007, this shift became official. Kate and Jerry McCann were declared arguidos, official suspects under Portuguese law. The world was stunned. The couple who had been at the center of a global campaign to find their daughter were now under suspicion themselves. The police put forward a theory. Madeleine had died in an accident in the apartment, perhaps from an overdose of a sedative the parents had allegedly given the children to make them sleep, and the parents, in a panic, staged the abduction to hide her body. To support this theory, specially trained sniffer dogs were brought in from the UK. The dogs allegedly signaled the presence of the scent of death in two places: behind the sofa in the living room and in the trunk of a Renault Scenic that the McCanns had rented 25 days after Madeleine's disappearance. Traces of blood and DNA were also reported to have been found in the same locations. However, this evidence was extremely dubious. The forensic data was never conclusive. The DNA samples were either too small for a precise analysis, only 19 components of Madeleine's profile, or were contaminated. The UK's leading forensic science service later stated that the results were inconclusive and could not definitively identify Madeleine. The rental car became another red flag in the public's eyes. Why would dogs detect the scent of death in a car rented almost a month after the disappearance? Jerry explained that they had transported bags of trash and the children's old clothes, including diapers, in it. But to many, this sounded unconvincing. Kate later revealed that during an 11-hour interrogation, the police put immense psychological pressure on her, offering a deal: confess to accidentally killing her daughter and hiding the body in exchange for a lenient sentence, just 2 years in prison. She refused with horror and indignation. In July of 2008, after nearly a year of public condemnation and living as suspects, this status was lifted from Kate and Jerry. The Portuguese Attorney General concluded there was insufficient evidence to press charges. The case was officially archived. For the McCanns, it was a relief, but not a victory. Their daughter was still missing, and the poisonous shadow of suspicion continued to follow them, poisoning their lives and the search for Madeleine. Despite the official clearing of their names, the McCanns understood that the Portuguese investigation had hit a dead end and would never be pursued with the necessary vigor. They were not going to give up. They continued to run their own campaign, hiring private investigators and keeping the public's interest alive through the Find Madeleine Fund, which raised millions of pounds in donations from people all over the world. In 2011, after their persistent appeals to the British government and an open letter from Jerry to Prime Minister David Cameron, Scotland Yard launched its own investigation, codenamed Operation Grange. This was an undertaking of unprecedented scale and cost. Initially, it wasn't a new search, but a complete and meticulous review of all existing materials, over 40,000 documents from Portuguese police files, private investigator reports, and thousands of international leads. At its peak, the operation involved more than 30 experienced officers, and its budget over the years exceeded £13 million, making it the most expensive missing person investigation in UK history. Operation Grange investigators reconstructed the timeline of events using modern technology, checked inconsistencies in witness statements, and pursued hundreds of previously dismissed theories. They ruled out numerous scenarios, from a robbery gone wrong to the involvement of resort staff. However, the work was fraught with enormous difficulties. Relations with the Portuguese police were tense. The Portuguese felt the British were trying to discredit their initial work and protect the McCanns. The huge expenses drew criticism in British society, where accusations of selective justice were voiced. Why was one case receiving so much attention and resources while thousands of other children remained missing? After years of painstaking work, when it seemed all leads were exhausted, a dramatic turn occurred in 2020. Working in close cooperation with German authorities, Operation Grange named a prime suspect. It wasn't someone from their circle of friends or acquaintances. It was a predator who had been hiding in plain sight all along, known to local police but somehow overlooked in the early years of the investigation. His name is Christian Bruckner. For more than a decade, the case remained cold. Then, in June of 2020, German police made a chilling announcement. They believed Madeleine was dead, and they had a prime suspect. Christian Bruckner, a German citizen, was no stranger to the criminal world. At the time of Madeleine's disappearance, he was around 30 years old and lived a transient life between Portugal and Germany, often sleeping in his battered yellow and white VW camper van. His criminal history was long and disturbing. 17 convictions for theft, robbery, drug trafficking, and, most terrifyingly, sexual offenses against children, dating back to 1994 when he was convicted for the abuse of a 6-year-old girl. In 2005, just 2 years before Madeleine vanished, Bruckner brutally raped a 72-year-old American woman in her home in Praia da Luz, the very same area where the McCanns were vacationing. This crime remained unsolved for many years until a breakthrough in DNA analysis led to him in 2019. What made him the prime suspect in Madeleine's case? Location and timing. Bruckner was living in the Algarve region in 2007. His last known address was just a few minutes' drive from the Ocean Club Resort. He was very familiar with the area. The phone call. Phone records showed that Bruckner received a 30-minute call on his mobile phone at 7:32 p.m. on May 3rd, while in the immediate vicinity of the resort. The call ended at 8:02 p.m., just half an hour before the McCanns sat down for dinner. The caller's identity is still unknown, and police believe this call may have been related to planning the crime or involved an accomplice. The alleged confession. A witness, a former friend of Bruckner's, claimed that in 2013, in a bar in Germany, while a TV program about the McCann case was on, a drunk Bruckner muttered, "She didn't scream." Criminal profile. His history of sexually abusing children, breaking into homes, and unpredictable behavior fit the profile of the kidnapper perfectly. He was a predator who preyed on the vulnerable. Suspicious behavior. The day after Madeleine's disappearance, Bruckner re-registered his other car, a Jaguar, in another person's name. This looked like a hasty attempt to get rid of potential evidence. The evidence. During searches related to other cases, USB drives with over 8,000 files of child pornography were found in Bruckner's possession, which he had hidden by burying them under the corpse of his dead dog. German prosecutors, particularly Hans Christian Wolters, made a series of bold statements, claiming they had concrete evidence that Madeleine was dead and that Bruckner was responsible. However, they admitted that this evidence was not sufficient to press murder charges. There is no body, no confession, and no direct forensic evidence linking him to apartment 5A. Bruckner, serving a long sentence in a German prison for the 2005 rape, denies any involvement and taunts the investigation. In letters to journalists, he calls himself a scapegoat and writes mockingly, When I get out, I'm going to enjoy a big steak. In 2024, he was acquitted of several other sexual assault charges due to a lack of evidence, further complicating the McCann case and putting prosecutors in a difficult position. Nearly 2 decades have passed. Madeleine McCann, if she is alive, is now a young woman. Operation Grange is still formally open, but its staff has been reduced to a few detectives. Christian Bruckner remains the prime suspect, but he has never been charged with Madeleine's abduction and murder. Searches conducted in 2023 at the Arade Reservoir, which Bruckner was rumored to have frequented, yielded no results. Every year on May 3rd, the anniversary of her disappearance, and on May 12th, her birthday, Kate and Jerry McCann publish a message. They never lose hope. "We will never stop searching the Yaike," they write. "We owe it to Madeleine, whatever the outcome may be. We still miss her dearly and are waiting." Their fund continues to collect donations, and their daughter's face, frozen at the age of 3, remains one of the most recognizable in the world. The case of Madeleine McCann became a mirror, reflecting the flaws of law enforcement systems, the cynicism of the media, and the deep-seated prejudices of society. It forced us to ask uncomfortable questions about why some tragedies receive global attention while thousands of others go unnoticed. But at the center of this storm, of all the theories and debates, remains one simple and heartbreaking truth. Parents are still searching for their child. They hold on to hope, the one thing no one has been able to take from them. The hope that one day the truth will come out, that someone, somewhere, will break years of silence. And in the meantime, the world continues to live with the echo from that Portuguese night, the echo of an empty space in a child's bed, and a question that still has no answer. Where is Madeleine McCann? Of course, here is the concluding segment for a video, including calls to action and audience engagement. This text can be used at the end of a documentary film. The story of Madeleine McCann is more than just an unsolved crime. It is an open wound on the heart of society, a reminder of the fragility of childhood and how easily a world can be turned upside down in an instant. After so many years, we are still left with questions that have no answers. And now, we want to turn to you, our viewers. What do you think about this case? Which theories seem most plausible to you? Was it a cold-blooded kidnapper like Christian Bruckner, hiding in plain sight? Was it a tragic accident that someone was desperately trying to cover up? Or does the truth lie somewhere else, in the shadows we haven't yet noticed? We encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Every perspective, every analysis could shed new light on this tangled story. But more importantly, let's think together. What can we as a society do to prevent tragedies like this from ever happening again? How can we better protect our children? What lessons should we learn from the failures of the investigation, from the behavior of the media, from the reaction of the public? Perhaps it's improving security systems at resorts, raising awareness of the risks, or simply being more vigilant and responsible toward one another. Let us know what measures you believe could truly make a difference. This story has touched millions of people around the world. It has united us in a shared sense of grief and hope. We want to see just how far the echo of this story has traveled. If you, like us, are concerned with the search for the truth, please subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new investigations. Give this video a like if you believe that we must continue to talk about cases like this so they are never forgotten. And finally, let us know in the comments what city or country you're watching from. Let's see the geography of our community, of people who care about the fate of a little girl who simply vanished one night in May. Thank you for being with us. Until next time.